Have you ever experienced heat so intense it felt like the world itself was burning alive? Imagine standing beneath a merciless sky, watching reality warp and shimmer in waves of scorching air, and wondering if this is where everything ends. Summer 1187. On the blistered plateau near Galilee, thousands upon thousands of Crusader warriors would confront not merely an opposing army, but their own fate written in fire and sand. The place was called Hattin. Two volcanic peaks jutted from the barren landscape like devil's horns, silent observers to what would unfold. On that waterless, sun-cursed ground, in the span of just one day, an entire kingdom would be erased from existence. But what sequence of events led to this catastrophe? How does a kingdom that stood for nearly a century suddenly collapse in a single afternoon? Let's rewind the clock. Nearly 100 years before that scorching day of doom, in 1099, the First Crusade had shocked the entire known world. European Christian armies had seized Jerusalem, a triumph celebrated as nothing short of miraculous intervention. In the aftermath, Crusader territories were established throughout the Holy Land: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and several others. Stone fortresses crowned the hilltops. The symbol of the cross flew proudly above defensive walls. Elite military orders, the Templars, the Hospitallers, maintained control over trade routes and strategic roads. For almost 90 years, it appeared that Christianity had embedded itself permanently into this foreign landscape. But foundations crumble when the ground beneath them shifts. By the 1180s, the landscape had transformed dramatically. Muslim territories, previously fragmented and vulnerable, were now consolidating under a single, powerful name: Saladin. This was no typical warlord. Saladin was a strategic genius, a unifier, a man driven by the conviction that Jerusalem rightfully belonged to Islam, not through acts of revenge, but through the restoration of justice. While Saladin's influence expanded steadily, the Crusader kingdom was deteriorating from within. Its monarchs lacked authority. Its noble families fought amongst themselves. Its knights, despite their courage, were divided by personal ambition and political maneuvering. And back in Europe, the Holy Land was becoming a distant memory, fading from public consciousness with each passing year. Then came the moment that ignited everything. Saladin had maintained an uneasy peace for years, waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity. But when a Crusader nobleman, Reinald of Chatillon, violated the truce by ambushing Muslim trade caravans and pilgrims, the rules of engagement changed forever. Saladin issued a call that echoed across the entire Muslim world: jihad. He assembled a truly massive force, estimates suggest over 30,000 warriors, and began his northern advance. His objective was crystal clear: not merely to defeat the Crusader army in battle, but to completely annihilate it, to erase it from the map. And in response, the Crusaders made a decision that would echo through history as one of the most disastrous military blunders ever recorded. They marched their entire army out of their protected fortifications, into exposed, open terrain, under the blazing hell of a July summer, with no access to water, no possibility of tactical retreat, no backup plan whatsoever. On July 4th, they would fight not for territorial control, but for their very existence. But what drove them to make such a catastrophically reckless decision? And who exactly were the personalities behind this fatal march into oblivion? To truly grasp how the Crusader kingdom engineered its own annihilation, you need to understand the men commanding it, and the brilliant mind opposing them. Standing at the center of the Islamic world was Saladin, not born into royalty, not handed power through bloodline. He climbed to prominence through military service and tactical brilliance. He initially served the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt. Then, with calculated ambition, he unified Egypt, Syria, and substantial portions of Mesopotamia under his rule, an achievement no Muslim leader had accomplished in generations. But Saladin's ambitions extended beyond mere conquest. He sought unity among Muslim lands, and he held a deep conviction that reclaiming Jerusalem wasn't simply a military objective, it was a sacred obligation. He possessed remarkable patience, strategic calculation, and surprisingly, he treated Christian subjects under his governance with unexpected respect, even while preparing to reclaim what he believed had been unjustly taken. On the opposing side stood King Guy of Lusignan, a French nobleman who had essentially married his way into Jerusalem's royal bloodline, ascending to the throne through political maneuvering rather than demonstrated capability. He wore a crown, but commanded little actual authority. He lacked the respect of his nobility, the confidence of his military commanders, and crucially, the wisdom necessary to navigate a kingdom teetering on the edge of war. Opposing Guy within his own court was Raymond III of Tripoli, intelligent, battle-hardened, and deeply skeptical of aggressive policies. Raymond had served as regent for years. He viewed Saladin not as some inhuman monster, but as a dangerous strategist who demanded careful respect. Raymond had even negotiated a peace agreement with Saladin, believing that survival through diplomacy was wiser than destruction through pride. But in a kingdom intoxicated by religious fervor, caution appeared identical to cowardice, or worse, treason. Then there was Raynald of Chatillon, aggressive, violent, utterly reckless, a former prince of Antioch who had endured years in Muslim captivity and emerged even more defiant than before. He raided trade convoys, violated treaties as if they were suggestions, even threatened to launch an attack on Mecca itself. He didn't merely provoke Saladin, he handed him the perfect justification for total war. Raynald's actions lit the match. Saladin would answer with an inferno. At this critical moment of existential crisis, the Crusaders needed unity more desperately than at any point in their history. Instead, they had chaos. Inside Jerusalem, rival noble factions engaged in power struggles. Some advocated for continued peace negotiations. Others, particularly the militant Templar order, demanded holy vengeance regardless of strategic reality. Standing at the center of this storm was King Guy, torn between louder, more forceful voices than his own. Pressured by pride and surrounded by warriors demanding action, he made the fateful choice: march out and confront Saladin on his chosen battlefield. This wasn't a tactical decision based on military advantage. This was politics wearing armor. They believed divine protection would shield them, but faith alone cannot hydrate an army dying of thirst under a murderous sun. July 3, 1187, the Crusader army marches directly into the furnace. Nearly 20,000 souls, mounted knights and foot soldiers, gleaming beneath layers of steel and scorching sunlight, depart from the springs of Saphuria. They're leaving water behind, fresh, life-giving water, walking away from it. Their destination, eastward toward Tiberias, toward what they don't yet realize is a perfectly constructed trap. Saladin understands this landscape intimately. He's already claimed the strategic high ground. His cavalry units have seized control of every known water source. His scouts circle the Christian column like predators watching wounded prey. And his most cruel weapon, fire, and it's only just beginning. The sun climbs higher, transforming the sky into white-hot iron. The atmosphere becomes utterly motionless, thick with suffocating heat. The Crusaders, dragging their heavy armor, siege equipment, and supply carts, find no relief, no shade, no mercy. Dust fills their throats until breathing becomes agony. War horses collapse mid-stride. Elite Templar knights faint inside their metal coffins. Water containers run completely dry. By evening, they establish a desperate camp near an elevated position in the terrain. two distinctive hills known throughout the region as the Horns of Hattin. That night, flames encircle them completely. Saladin's forces ignite the dry grassland surrounding the Crusader position, feeding the flames with desert winds. Thick smoke floods through their encampment. Sleep transforms into violent coughing fits. Water becomes something men whisper prayers for. Morning arrives, July 4th. The Crusaders attempt to form proper battle lines, but there's no strength remaining in their ranks. Only raw desperation and animal survival instinct. They charge forward, not pursuing glory or tactical advantage, but water, just water. Raymond of Tripoli leads a courageous thrust forward, attempting to puncture the encirclement. A small number of riders manage to escape the deadly ring. The vast majority are cut down like wheat before a scythe. I of Lusignan orders his central forces to advance, but they stumble, falter, break apart. Arrows descend like deadly rain. Saladin's archers maintain relentless mechanical volleys, and then comes the finishing stroke. Saladin's heavy cavalry crashes down from the elevated positions. Discipline combined with fury made manifest. The Crusader formation disintegrates completely. Warriors abandon their shields, scream for mercy that won't come, attempt to flee on shattered legs and broken willpower. Knights who once rode with legendary pride now fall beneath their own emblems, drowning in dust and blood. By midday, it's finished. The true cross, Christianity's most sacred relic, is captured, a symbol of divine protection now in enemy hands. The elite knights of the Templar and Hospitaller orders lie dead or chained for slavery. Reynold is dragged before Saladin's presence. Saladin offers him water, a gesture of civilized courtesy even toward an enemy. Reynold drinks. King Guy does not. And Saladin, keeping a vow he'd made years earlier, personally executes Reynold for his crimes, for his arrogance. For the wars he started, Guy is spared. His kingdom, however, is not. Word of Hattin's catastrophe spreads faster than wildfire through dry timber. Every fortress, every coastal settlement throughout the Crusader kingdom receives the same devastating news. The army is gone. Not defeated, gone. Obliterated. The shield protecting Christendom had been shattered into dust. And Saladin doesn't pause to celebrate. With surgical precision, he sweeps through Galilee, then systematically advances down the Mediterranean coast, Acre, Nazareth, Sidon, Beirut, Ascalon. One after another, cities collapse like a chain reaction. Without mounted knights to mount any defense, most simply surrender. Some are abandoned before Saladin even arrives. Terror moves faster than his cavalry ever could. In Jerusalem, there are no remaining armies. Only terrified civilians, priests clutching holy texts, and a handful of nobility. The city trembles in collective fear. But one man returns against all logic. Balian of Ibelin. He'd already departed for exile but turned back for his family. He formally requested safe passage from Saladin. Remarkably, Saladin granted it. But what Balian discovered inside Jerusalem's walls shook him to his core. No soldiers, no fortifications. And thousands upon thousands of people, women, children, the elderly, clinging to the holy city as their final refuge. Balian takes up arms once more. He organizes whatever resistance can be assembled. Arms ordinary citizens. Prepares for siege, not to achieve victory but simply to protect the innocent. On September 20th, 1187, Saladin's army surrounds Jerusalem. But unlike the Crusaders in 1099, who had butchered everyone in the city when they captured it, Saladin offers terms: peaceful surrender, safe passage for all residents. No bloodshed. Balian resists initially but ultimately chooses life over pride. October 2nd, 1187, 88 years to the exact day after Crusaders had taken Jerusalem through massacre, the city returns to Muslim control. There is no slaughter, no looting. Only ransom payments made in silver coins and bitter tears. Christian refugees pour through the city gates in silent, endless columns, clutching crosses and children with equal desperation. Saladin enters Jerusalem. He doesn't demolish the churches. He doesn't burn the Christian shrines. He had conquered the city, but he spared its spiritual soul. In Europe, the news strikes like thunder from a clear sky. The Pope himself is said to have died from the shock of hearing Jerusalem had fallen. Church bells throughout Christendom ring in collective mourning. And in royal palaces, monarchs who had previously ignored the Holy Land suddenly mobilized massive armies. Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, Frederick Barbarossa of Germany. The Third Crusade is born from shame and fury, but it would never reclaim Jerusalem, because what was truly lost at Hattin wasn't territory on a map. It was the kingdom itself, the very idea of it. Hattin wasn't merely a battlefield where armies clashed. It was a mirror, a brutal, unforgiving reflection showing Christendom what it had truly become. For decades, the Crusader states had functioned as symbols of religious triumph. Castles crowning hills, cathedrals rising from deserts, knights riding beneath sacred banners. But beneath all that stone and steel existed something far more fragile: division. Hattin stripped away the armor. It exposed a kingdom constructed more on arrogance than strategy, more on ego than genuine unity. It demonstrated that even faith, sincere, passionate faith, can fail catastrophically when it abandons wisdom. The fall of Jerusalem wasn't the immediate end of Crusader aspirations. The dream lingered in ports like Tyre and Acre, in the distant calculations of European kings and popes. But what died at Hattin was belief itself. The belief that victory was divinely guaranteed, that God would ensure triumph regardless of human decisions. After Hattin, that myth of divine protection shattered like glass. Saladin, meanwhile, transcended mere conquest. He became legend incarnated. Muslim poets composed verses celebrating his mercy. Christian chroniclers documented his honor. Even his sworn enemies respected him. He had achieved victory not solely through military might, but through restraint. He didn't massacre populations. He didn't desecrate holy sites. He governed with justice. And that restraint echoed through history louder than any sword clash ever could. In the Western world, Hattin transformed into a cautionary tale for future monarchs, armies, and empires. No power is too sacred to fall. No fortress stands eternally. Faith divorced from humility and unity leads not toward salvation, but toward absolute ruin. Today, the battlefield of Hattin lies silent, no grand monuments, no preserved ruins, only dust, wild grass, and wind moving through empty space, but it speaks to anyone willing to listen. It tells a story not fundamentally about warfare, but about hubris, about pride that destroys kingdoms, a story that remains urgently relevant, because Hattin wasn't just about events in the distant past. It was, and still is, about the cost of forgetting what actually holds civilizations together. The kingdom of Jerusalem didn't actually die at Hattin. Not immediately, anyway. It limped onward in exile, in scattered fragments, in titles without real power. For years following Hattin, Crusader leadership clung desperately to coastal strongholds. Tyre, Tripoli, Acre, they still crowned themselves kings, still raised banners proudly, but the heart had been torn out. Jerusalem, the holy jewel, the entire purpose of their existence, no longer belonged to them. Even when the Third Crusade finally arrived, when Richard the Lionheart recaptured port cities, won significant battles, and stood within mere miles of Jerusalem's gates, he didn't march on the city, not because he couldn't capture it, but because he knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't hold it. That brutal truth marked the genuine end of the dream. A kingdom that cannot defend its own capital has already ceased to exist. In the years that followed, the Crusader states became shadows of themselves. Castles transformed into hollow shells. Military orders once feared across battlefields became bankers, reduced to pawns in European political games. By 1291, with the fall of Acre, the last Crusader foothold in the Holy Land, the entire enterprise vanished completely. And with it died the dream. But what survived was memory of faith and fury. Of glory and catastrophic failure. In the East, Saladin remained an eternal hero, a symbol of righteous resistance against foreign occupation. In the West, Hattin was whispered in churches, illustrated in manuscripts, debated endlessly by monarchs. A single day, a single disastrous choice, that transformed the world forever. Even now, in the modern Middle East, echoes of Hattin continue reverberating. Contested territories, religious identity, national boundaries. Jerusalem remains a spark, a city still disputed, still sacred to multiple faiths, still aching with the weight of history. And all of it traces back to a barren hill in Galilee, to a battlefield bearing no tombstones, to a silence that somehow still speaks across 8 centuries. Hattin was not merely a military defeat, it was a lesson written in blood and thirst. But is that lesson truly remembered, or are we condemned to repeat these patterns? Perhaps that's not the complete story. Perhaps history never finishes speaking, it simply waits for us to listen. The horns of Hattin still stand, silent witnesses to the day an empire fell because it forgot the most fundamental truth: unity matters more than pride, wisdom matters more than faith alone, and no kingdom, no matter how holy it believes itself to be, is too powerful to destroy itself from within. What will we learn from their mistake? Or will we, like them, march confidently into our own furnace, believing heaven will save us from our arrogance? History is watching. The question remains open. Alternative opening hook, July 4th, 1187. While you might associate that date with American independence, on that exact day centuries earlier, an entire Christian kingdom died of thirst. This is how it happened. Mid-video retention hook insert before the march into hell. But here's what makes this truly insane: they had a choice. They could have stayed behind walls with water with safety. Instead, they walked straight into a death trap. Why? Stay with me, because the answer reveals something terrifying about human nature. Before climax, right now imagine being a knight in that army. You've been marching for hours. Your throat feels like sandpaper. The enemy surrounds you, and you realize there's no way out. That's where we are in the story. At ending, one kingdom, one battle, one lesson that history keeps trying to teach us. If this story made you think differently about faith, power, or pride, let me know in the comments which moment hit you hardest.